I probably could have picked an easier topic from this gospel today, but I decided to tackle the whole evil spirit, demon, casting out demon thing. I think that'd be kind of fun this morning to talk about casting out demons. But the idea of an evil spirit, it calls it an unclean spirit in our lesson, but the idea of an evil spirit sounds too much like superstition to most of us, don't you think? I mean, it just sounds too much like, or we prefer to relegate such things to the mindset of a pre-scientific world. Now, maybe that's because we have been exposed to so much human evil in our time. The commentary William Barclay tells of a traveler to Soviet Georgia in the days before World War II. She was taken to see a very humble old woman in a little cottage. And the old peasant woman asked her if she was going to Moscow. And the traveler said she was. Then asked the woman, "Would you mind delivering a parcel of homemade toffee to my son? He cannot get anything like that in Moscow." Her son's name was Joseph Stalin, the same Stalin who is said to have murdered millions of his own people. Confronted with monsters like Stalin and like Adolf Hitler, who seemed in every aspect kind of like normal human beings, but they found it possible to rationalize barbaric behavior, we don't feel a lot of need to look behind every bush for demonic spirits. The human face of evil is quite enough, thank you. And all you've had to do is read the paper lately, and we've read about a number of evil spirits, to be real honest. Horrible stuff. Many people, however, for many people, there is a tremendous interest in the demonic, right? I mean, Hollywood has discovered that our primordial fears are a fertile ground for grinding out one gory horror movie after another. Interest in the occult and witchcraft is probably more widespread in Western society at any time since the Salem witch trials. This is really interesting, I read that there are more self-proclaimed witches in Paris, France, than there are Roman Catholic priests. Now, considering that Paris is a Roman Catholic stronghold, that statistic is a little disturbing. Some people contend that the resurgence of interest in the occult and witchcraft is a sign of our society's hunger for the supernatural. I'm not sure about that. Perhaps people are just looking for a cheap thrill. I don't know. We really don't know, what the New Testament means when it speaks of casting out evil spirits or unclean spirits. Is it referring to mental and emotional illness? Would physical problems with unusual manifestations such as epilepsy be considered demonic in a pre-scientific world? Most scholars today are convinced, biblical scholars are convinced that this is the nature of so-called demonic possession in the Scriptures. Does this mean that we should forget these stories and consign such problems to modern medicine and psychiatry? I don't think so. Let's not be so quick to do that. Jesus still casts out demons, whether they be physical, emotional, or spiritual. Okay? A little caveat, this is not in the script up there, by the way, if you're following along for me. But how many of you have heard of the Blind Boys from Alabama? It's a group. It's a kind of a gospel, an old-time gospel group. I just love the Blind Boys from Alabama. Well, they got a song in one of their CDs called Ain't You Glad You Got Good Religion? Ain't you glad you got good religion? So in that theme, good religion heals the body. Okay? Good religion heals the body. Modern science has helped us to see more clearly than ever before that there is a remarkable interrelationship between the mind, the soul, and the body. Our thoughts and our attitudes can literally make us sick. We know that today. We know that. Of course, we have to approach this subject with a lot of caution, okay? We're not advocating replacing medicine with so-called faith healing. This is a field where so much damage has been done by spiritual quacks that most responsible religious people are afraid to even approach the subject. Even a man as great as Mahatma Gandhi was guilty of a grievous error in this regard. Gandhi's wife one time was seriously ill with pneumonia and was fading fast. Gandhi refused to let her have penicillin, arguing that alien substances should not be introduced into the body. Accordingly, his wife died. A similar tragedy befell the Larry Parker family. In his book, We Let Our Son Die, Larry records the tragic story of the devastation his family experienced when their diabetic 11-year-old died. Now, why did the boy die? Because his family, by faith, withheld his insulin. They were encouraged by friends and their pastor to take this so-called step of faith. I want to be really clear at this point, very clear. Such actions are not steps of faith. Absolutely not. Penicillin, insulin, those themselves are a gift from God. They're a part of God's healing power. Why would we not utilize one of God's precious gifts? It makes no sense. Good health is God's plan for life. The greatest enemies our bodies have, basically, are our own destructive habits. We know that too. We know, for example, that vigorous daily exercise will add 3 years to our life. Okay, that's good. Excessive worry or stress can subtract those 3 years and 1 more year. Okay? Smoking more than 2 packs of cigarettes a day will cost you 8 years of your life. I think it's probably more than that, but this is the one statistic I had. The greatest enemies of our bodies is oftentimes our own bad habits. The greatest ally we have in maintaining the healthfulness of our bodies is, first of all, the conviction that our bodies are the temple of the living God. The Bible tells us that. Our bodies are the temple of the living God. And so, therefore, we must not mistreat our bodies. And secondly, the confidence that if we trust in God, He will provide for our needs. We got to trust in God. This helps us to relax and sort of enjoy life more. It is the peace of God that helps us with our nervous habits and sleepless nights that can do amazing things for us. Now, not only is trust in God good preventative medicine, but there's evidence that there's healing power in such faith even when the body is already diseased. Now, some people, when they are given bad news by a doctor, they just immediately fold up emotionally. Their worst fears have been realized, and thus they simply give up and give in to the inevitable. But that doesn't have to happen. The most famous example of not giving in is that of Norman Cousins. You may remember the story. He was a former editor of Saturday Review. But doctors told Cousins that he was suffering from a painful collagen disease of the connective tissues. Nodules had begun to appear on his body, and at one point, his jaws were almost totally locked. The doctors told him he had only 1 chance in 500 to live. One physician told him that he had never witnessed a single recovery from this particular illness. Not one. So immediately, Norman Cousins embarked on a program of combining massive doses of vitamin C and a program of daily laughter. Laughter. Yeah. He began with funny films shown on his own projector. Among them were Candid Camera clips. Remember Candid Camera? He did that. And some were Marx Brothers films. I made a joyous discovery, he relates, that 10 minutes of genuine belly laughter had an anesthetic effect and would give me 2 hours of pain-free sleep. He repeated the procedure as needed, and within months, he was totally free from pain and was able to return to work. This is not to say that disease is never fatal. If that were true, none of us would ever die. That's ridiculous. It is to say, however, that we are a unitary being. We cannot separate our lifestyle from our general well-being. The best possible lifestyle is one in which we trust God, and we try to live responsibly in light of God's love for us. Good religion heals the body. Good religion also heals the emotions. All of us at some times reach the breaking point emotionally. There's a story about a monastery in Europe perched high on a cliff, way up several hundred feet in the air. And the only way to reach the monastery is to be suspended in a basket which is pulled to the top by several monks who pull and tug with all their strength. Now, obviously, the ride up the steep cliff in that basket is terrifying. One tourist got exceedingly nervous about halfway up as he noticed the rope by which he was suspended was old and frayed. With a trembling voice, he asked the monk who was riding with him in the basket, "How often do they change the rope?" The monk thought for a moment and then answered kind of brusquely, "Whenever it breaks." Makes sense. There have been times in my life when emotionally I've been suspended in that basket. I think maybe you have too. All of us come to that moment at some time in our life, though many people would rather die than show it. Okay? There's a story of Roland. Roland was an officer in Charlemagne's army, and Roland was in charge of the rear guard of the army. And suddenly his company was ambushed. The battle raged fiercely against terrible, terrible odds. The situation was not completely hopeless, however, because Roland had a horn with a blast that could be heard 30 miles away. 30 miles away. Oliver, his friend, begged him to blow the horn so that Charlemagne would hear and come back and help. But Roland was too proud. He was too proud to ask for help. And so one by one his men fell, fighting till only he was left. And then with his last dying breath, he blew the horn. And Charlemagne rushed to his aid, but it was too late, for Roland was dead because he was too proud to ask for help. Isn't it amazing how fearful some people are of revealing that they need help? Some people just are so afraid to do that. Now, perhaps they're afraid that someone will take advantage of them. Colorful former football coach John Madden says that some professional football players won't have an injury treated by when anyone else is around for that same reason. Quarterback Kenny Stabler was like that, and he says, and so was legendary Jim Brown. Instead of going to the trainer's room after a game, Brown treated himself at home. He didn't want anybody to know that he was hurt. He figured that if even the trainer or one of his teammates knew, then somebody on the other team might know. And if somebody on the other team knew, then their tacklers might gang up on him, hoping to re-injure him. That was his thinking. Now, we can maybe understand some of those fears for a professional football player, but it's really sad when a normal person like you or me is afraid to share his or her hurts. There are times when all of us reach the breaking point. At such times, we desperately need a friend. And that's one of the important reasons for a church family. So important. Because many of us, this is where we turn when we hurt. And we should. Our relationship with God is also critical in the healing process, however. One psychotherapist has concluded that the major factor in the effect of treatment on an emotionally disturbed patient is the therapist's expectations. Okay? According to this study, the therapist can literally communicate a winning or losing feeling with the patient almost unobtrusively. For example, a therapist might say, "Well, you're the kind of person who can pull yourself out of depression. You can get yourself out of the house. You can join a social organization, get out to meet people. I really believe in you. You can do this." Compare that to someone who says, "Well, you're now too fragile to go out of your home." Isn't it good to know that we have one who always believes in us, always, who says to us, "You are created in my image. You can make it. I believe in you." See, good religion heals the body. Good religion heals the emotions. Good religion also heals the soul. And by soul, we mean the whole person. Okay, the whole person, the whole package. who we really are inside, not what other people see, not a tiny fragment of our being, but the totality of our being, our personality, our dreams, our fears. When we understand who we are under God, when we surrender ourselves to God's love and trust in His providence, there's healing that takes place. Such healing took place in the life of actress Betty Hutton. One night many years ago, Miss Hutton joined the cast of the Broadway production of the musical Annie in New York City. Immediately prior to this time, Miss Hutton had experienced a spiritual awakening and was making a comeback after many years of failure, family breakdown, bankruptcy, and a bout with alcoholism. The program notes for Annie that night at the Alvin Theater contained extensive biographical sketches about members of the cast, all except Betty Hutton. Her biography consisted of 5 words, but those words spoke to everyone in the audience. And when Betty finally appeared on the stage, the theater burst into joyful applause. No one minded that the production was held up for several minutes as she stood in the spotlight, eyes glistening with tears as people applauded. What were those 5 words that Betty Hutton had written? She simply wrote, "I'm back, thanks to God." Jesus was teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum when a man in the grip of an evil spirit began shouting at him. Now, we don't know the nature of that unclean spirit, but we know that Jesus delivered the man. Now, we don't know whether the man had a family, but imagine with me a little bit. Exercise your imagination. Imagine him returning home in his right mind with a kind of serene look on his face. His wife greets him at the door. His children peer suspiciously from behind their mother's dress. He gently calls them out and he lifts them into his arms, and he turns to his wife and he says softly, "I'm back, thanks to God." Good religion heals the body. Good religion heals the emotions. Most importantly of all, good religion heals the soul. Thanks to God. Thanks for watching. I hope this video can further the discussion of your relationship with Christ, either at home or maybe in the comments below.